There it is. All right. Welcome back to another live but recorded episode of Pop Archives. I am Sam, your pop archivist, and I am joined today by two lovely people who I have the pleasure of calling online friends. The writer and artist of the very wonderful Archival Quality, which is backwards in this screen, but you will know what it is nonetheless. I am joined by Ivy, Weir, and Steenz. Welcome to the show, lady.
Yay! Thank you for having us.
Thanks for
Yes.
having us.
So a full disclosure kind of thing. I've known Ivy and Steenz for a few years now. I interviewed them. God, what was it? 2014, 2016? When did this come out?
I have no. Oh, well, this came out in 2018.
2018. Okay.
It must have been 2018.
I'm making us friends for far longer than.
I feel like we may have known each other for at least a year.
I think so.
Yeah, something like that. Because back when I used to do, I guess, comics journalism and reviews and everything, I had poked at you both to talk about Archival Quality when it was first announced. I think, like those first kind of like, hey, look at this new book that's coming out, and I was like, I'm an archivist. I must read this and then talk to the people who created it. And you guys came on my previous podcast, That Girl with the Curls, which is still bumming around somewhere, and talked about it before it had even come out. So we were kind of talking around a subject that I hadn't read yet, and you guys couldn't really talk as much about it at the time because no one knew. So now I get to say up top, spoilers for Archival Quality. Because we will get into some stuff in here. I don't want to spoil everything, but there's definitely things in it that appeal to me from an archival point of view, but also just wanting to get into your guys' heads as to like why and por qué, wherefore what. So I guess we'll start off with a very quick summary. Do either one of you want to tackle that, or do you want to leave that up to me?
You know what?
I was going to say that I have said the summary 1,200 times over the weekend for C2E2, so I want to pass it along.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I was going to say that I haven't done it in a while, so I should see if I can still do it. So look at that synergy.
Challenge accepted by Ivy.
Okay. Trying to remember like if I can actually do the same elevator pitch that I used to for this book. But so Archival Quality is the story of Sel Walden, who loses her job at a public library and finds herself in the employ of the Monroe Museum, which is a museum that specializes in historical medical artifacts. Mm-hmm. And while there, she begins to become entangled with the desires and dreams of a ghost that is haunting the museum. So it's a story not only about Sel's involvement with this ghost, but also Sel's discovery of herself as she journeys through a period of hardship with her mental health.
Yeah. I feel like that's a
description. Yeah.
I feel like that summarized it pretty well. Yeah. Good job. Good job remembering your
Who got it?
I feel like my spiel is if you took mine and just like filtered it through a thesaurus, and it's not the same thing.
Steenz, do you get like more wordy, or do you like how I mean, you don't have to get into your actual approach, but like, are you more like, do you flourish a bit, or do you kind of try to keep it tighter?
I think it depends on who I'm talking to. Mm-hmm. I can kind of tell from their vibe if they need further discussion or if they're just here to say hello, you know?
Yeah. So then I have to ask, Ivy, you do mention in the afterword for Archival Quality that you worked in a library previously, and that the idea for the book came to you kind of when you were working in a library. What then inspired you to move it in, beyond this haunted museum idea into more of the like, let's go into the archives and make that kind of the central focus to a degree?
So I am a librarian. I have my master's in library science. Um, and I currently work as a librarian. So it's libraries have always been a big part of my life. I started working in a public library when I was 19. And then I never left. I was still here.
This comic book writing gig
anymore.
no.
But when I left my public library job in undergrad to go to college. I had taken a year off, and I ended up doing a lot of work. I went to art school, and I was doing a lot of photographic work about historical medical photography.
Mhm.
So I ended up working in the archives of the Mutter Museum here in Philadelphia,
Oh, nice.
which is, yeah, I was an intern there during my undergrad. And so that was like a huge inspiration for the book. Obviously, if you're not familiar with the Mutter Museum, it is a medical oddities museum here in Philly, and working in the archive was buck wild.
I'm sure it was. Oh my God.
So I started thinking about this as a book when I was there. And part of it was like this escapism, right? Because I was doing my undergrad, I was like headed towards being done, and I had been so fatigued looking at all these like gnarly medical images, both for my schoolwork and then in the internship. And so I started kind of exploring this as a fantasy through this ghost story. And I never really thought it would go anywhere. I used it to apply to the Clarion West workshop and got firmly rejected. And I was like, cool, guess I'll die.
Like, screw you.
I think Neil Gaiman was one of the mentors there that year. So like, I'm not gonna lie that I've got like a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I'm like, yeah, Neil, it got published. What do you think now, dude?
You're like, I'm never watching Sandman, just to stick it to you.
Literally was watching Sandman right before I logged on to talk to you, so clearly my chip's not that bad. But anyway, so after undergrad, I was working in a comic book store. I joined a group for folks that worked at comic book stores where I met Steenz, and I saw Steenz's art, and I was like, I gotta do something with this person. Like, I just really like this. Like, I just like, I'm not usually, I'm a fairly private and shy and retiring person. So I was like possessed by the comics demon. And I was just like, look, I like what you're about, son. So,
yeah, that was word for word. The first thing ever said to me was,
I was like, I have this idea, and would you think about wanting to do it together as a comic? And that was really also the beginning of our friendship, because that's part of, like, we had talked a little bit, but that's what got us talking more. So, I mean, it was a good call. If I ever shot my shot once in life, I'm glad it was this one, not my husband. This one.
Like, this friendship will last forever. Marriages can come and go, but this.
How much money has Huge made you?
Yeah, like no money.
How many books has he drawn for you? I mean,
I'm 2-0 right now.
Yeah,
I'm 2-0.
I feel like Steenz is winning just by a long shot here.
It's really funny because I met them both the same year.
Oh.
So it's like I have the same anniversary almost.
You get on the call and you're like, hey, it's mine and Yuju's anniversary, but it's also yours and mine. He's like, hun, who are you talking to? No one. That's first of all, you guys are adorable. And second of all, it's the sweetest story. I especially love the like, hey there, son, I'd like to work with you in comics. That's my favorite part.
Because it was really perfect. There's not too often, as an artist, you get someone saying we should work together on something and it not being shit. And like to actually want to embark on a long-term exploration and journey is like it's a big deal, so I was really excited because all of my previous experience working with writers had always been for short comics and for smaller projects. And so it was really great to be able to have the opportunity to. Sorry.
Really? That's so rude.
No, my cat is a bully, to be honest, but he gets it from me. But yeah, so being able to really like take that journey into the world of long form comic creation with Ivy was really, really cool, especially considering we still talk.
You're still friends to this day.
Like, you think about like, you know, creators that work together and you always wonder, like, are they actually homies? Do they know anything about each other? You know, so it's like really cool to be able to have that relationship in addition to being able to start something really exciting for our careers.
I don't think a lot of people, I mean, really understand the process of making a comic, first of all. I think that's always one of the first things that people who, you know, talk about comics really get wrong, where it's just like, it doesn't just form like, you know, Athena jumping out of Zeus's head. Like, it's not a fully formed thing. It's an ongoing, constantly revising, editing, conversations that are happening between the two of you, editors, you know, the publisher, anything like the from start to finish. I mean, Ivy, you've had this idea since you were in your early 20s, basically. So it's a very long journey from inception to actual creation and product.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's just like it bums me out sometimes when I see people being all like, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? So it's like, you child, please sit down. The adults are talking. You don't know. I barely understand it. And I like, and I still respect it a little bit more than you do, except for that cat. That cat respects it less than you do.
Really, this is every time I get on a video chat nowadays.
Gotta make it all about her.
Every single time. I can't lock her out. I just have to deal with it. You know,
like, look at me, look at this fineness.
She's cute, but sometimes she needs a stern talking to.
And she's like, I'm totally paying attention and going to listen to what you just said. Thank you. Steenz, actually, from your point of view, what was it about Archival Quality that spoke to you? Or was it just Ivy's pitch of the I want to work with you, son?
I mean, Ivy not only said, let's work on something, it was like, let's work on something, and then gave me like the elevator pitch for it. So it was a little bit of both, you know. I was excited to be asked, but also excited that like the story is like 100% up my alley, you know. Like I really love scary things, and I never feel like I can do scary stuff because my art is so sweet.
It's deceptive. It's like, it looks very, it's so, it's such an illustrative style, and then to get to see like kind of the horror elements brought into it is unexpected.
Yeah, so that's what I was really most excited about. You know, those are the kinds of stories that I really want to be able to tell. And having someone that already has an idea is really nice. Especially if the idea is so cool, because you know there's so many things that I want to do creatively that I am open to doing different projects that scratch that itch, even if I wasn't the one that came up with that project, you know? So like, even though Archival Quality was, you know, and created initially by Ivy, if I feel like it's both of ours in a lot of ways, but I took the job because I wanted to do something like that. And it really just checked all my boxes. So there was no universe where I would have said no, is all there is to it.
You guys created, I mean, I mean, I have a lot of archivist friends, which, you know, why wouldn't I in my field or whatever, but I do recommend it all the time, where they're, you know, just kind of like, you know, because it's very rare to get a comic that actually deals with an archives, especially in such a way where, I mean, the closest that comes to it that's not a comic is kind of like the Magnus Archives podcast, which I don't know if either of you have listened to or are aware of, but it's basically like the setting is an archives. The main character is an archivist. And so you're like actually kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of it, but also these horror elements are in place where you're just kind of like, okay, yeah, I can see how, yep, everything about this is in a situation I've either been in and it could possibly happen to me.
That's like another really cool part about the comics making process at all, is the ability to create a visual representation of something that you haven't ever seen before, you know? Mm-hmm. So like everyone has that idea of what it's like to work in a library and what it's like to work in an archive, but to actually see it happening, mm-hmm. It's really refreshing, not just for archivists and librarians, but for people who want to get a peek behind that curtain, you know? Yeah. So that's why I really like telling stories that have some root in realism, because I feel like it's just a really great opportunity to be able to illustrate something that it hasn't been actually illustrated before.
Yeah, it's really rare. And I mean, so when you guys were kind of like constructing the architecture of the Monroe Museum, what, like, did you draw from any, like, you drew from the Mutter Museum, obviously, with a lot of the medical oddities, I assume, but like in terms of its like layout and architecture, did a lot go into that, or was it just like, here's some pictures, go from there?
Yes and no. So I actually went to Philadelphia to visit Ivy and also visit the museum. So it was a really great opportunity for me to get the vibe. You know, I wasn't more worried about like the actual literal representation, because obviously we don't want to get sued by the Mutter Museum, but because that sort of thing isn't really necessary for me. I really want to be able to get the feeling right, you know? So I took a lot of photos of things that felt like quintessentially odd and really thought about like the colors of the brick and the floor and how things are laid out for a museum, but also for a portion that you wouldn't have seen, you know, because I didn't work in the archives at the Mutter. I only saw what visitors see, you know.
The access issues,
exactly. And so when I designed the Monroe Museum, which I'm really glad you remember the name of the museum, Ivy, because you're just talking about, I haven't read this book in forever.
I said it and I was like, boy, I hope that's right.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll find out.
Well, we changed it while I was writing the script, and so sometimes I'm worried I say the original name.
Yeah, the original was the Logan.
No, it was the Monroe. Now it's the Logan.
Now it's the Logan.
God.
Okay, so there we go. Yeah, here's another thing about
I did it. We changed it because it sounded too much like the Mutter.
Like the Mutter Museum. And so you're right. We both love Wolverine. I'm pretty sure our reason.
Yeah, because originally it was spelled Monroe like Aurora Monroe, so we moved it to.
Exactly.
I can't believe I did the thing that I was.
But like, you know, here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize about creative teams is once the book is done, the book is out of our mind. I have no reason to go back and reread that book. So it's like
I'm in edit for a new book right now, and I'm like, if this isn't about Little Princess, like it doesn't have room.
I just reread it and I forgot. So I don't know what that says about me.
It's the small things. But yeah, when I was creating the museum, I just wanted to get the vibe right. And I think I got the vibe from the kinds of things that, I don't know, that made me feel a certain way when I was there. And it's hard to describe because I feel like a lot of it I do subconsciously. So it's hard to really actually say specifically, well, I picked this from that thing and I did this because it reminded me of X, Y, and Z. Because a lot of those times you make the decision right in the moment, or at least I do. I make it right in the moment based on how it feels. So the Logan Museum in the book is how I feel the Mutter Museum was when I went there, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah, the mutter is a vibe in and of itself. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, when I in my previous job, I was doing a thing for work on the East Coast, and got to go up to Philadelphia for a weekend, and went there specifically because at one point in my life I had thought about being a doctor, and medical history was always a thing I kind of gravitated towards. And then archives, like Ivy, I'm absolutely jealous that you got to work in the archives for the Modern Museum.
It's a
So
crazy place to be.
like I follow their YouTube channel on YouTube. So they do like these talks, and they go behind the scenes and everything, and so it's just fascinating for me. But then like the vibe of the place is at certain points celebratory of medicine, and then in a weird behind the scenes ways, it's also kind of like ghoulish about
Yeah.
medical history, and obviously like experimentations that happened over centuries. That a museum is essentially a collection of people's lives that are put on display for the rest of us to look at and go like, ew, gross. And you're like, well, that was a person who lived a life, and there's their skeleton, kiddo. So happy hunting. Because it's one of the things too in the book that especially stood out to me, because there's in the last few years in like archival circles, there's been this idea of, not this idea, but this practice of radical empathy. There's the stereotype that archivists are like cold, impassionate, impersonal, distant from the items that they process, or the collections that they create. Where in fact you have a lot of archivists that get a terrible type of burnout from dealing with these same materials that have to do with like atrocities, or there are archivists of color who deal with like slavery archives, and having to deal with the onset of this constantly in their face all the time, for the betterment of history, but at the same time their own psychological and mental health is affected by it. So having archival quality, and it just kind of like tapping into that, whether unconsciously or consciously, was amazing. Like for me, like looking at that and going like, oh, no one really talks about this part either. And so it was, again, it was great to have that. Whether or not that was part of the intention, it had an unconscious effect, I believe.
It was. I mean, it was because as I had said, like I was at this like really burnt out point when I went to the Muter and came up with the idea. And then ultimately what I ended up doing my undergraduate thesis project was on, I created a false taxonomy for an infinite library, and made a book that encapsulated it. And then I cataloged the book and put it in my public library. It was like this performance art piece.
I love it.
Always been insufferable. But
you precocious little scamp, you.
But I got really into reading like Foucault and Derrida, and like, really studying like the violence of archiving, and the concept of the arcanon and what is excluded from the archive. And
hold on. Let's just little archive fever.
Literally behind me on the shelf. Yeah, I kept it from my undergrad.
That was my graduate school right there.
Yep. So, when I was working on AQ, I mean, it was very much for me this catharsis of like going through that. And also because, like Sal, my early 20s were a just nonstop party of untreated mental illness. So it was, like that feeling of being so involved in the archival process through what I was doing with my thesis, and just feeling like totally unhinged and disconnected in every other way. And so, I think the act of archiving and the act of librarianship can be a very violent thing.
Very much so. Yeah. No,
you know,
saying the magic words Foucault and Derrida, and you're just like, well, yep, we're going on here we go. Like, I had fancied myself at one point. My master's thesis was going to be like tackling Derrida, and I was like, I guess I'll have to read this. And then, oh God, like
a lot of emails to my thesis. So my thesis advisor was a composer, actually. So I finished my undergrad at this college in Vermont called Goddard College, which lets you design your own program.
mm-hmm.
I had done multiple years at Parsons School of Design, and I was miserable. So then I went to this place where they were like, you can do whatever you want here and we'll support you. And it's really super academically rigorous. Hence me doing Derrida and Foucault on an undergrad thesis. But my two thesis readers, one was a composer and one was a poet. And so it was really cool. It was such an interesting way to explore that stuff. And then I think that really prepped me for working on this script for Archival Quality also, because I came at it from like not just this super theory heavy place, but then like I left undergrad with this feeling of like, well, this can be violent, but it can also be beautiful when you're constructing it through these, like theoretical pathways. And then also I like ghost stories. So I liked haunted houses.
Mm-hmm. I like Scooby-Doo, and I would like a mystery to be solved. Yeah, it's I mean, yeah, like you said, archives, a lot of violence has been committed within archives in terms of the subject matter, like taxonomy and just the terminology that we use around it as well. Like the morbid terminology around archives is a interesting thing to tackle because people don't really perceive it that way until you point it out to them. He's just like, do you realize that you talk a lot about how things seem to die when they go to the archives? And they're like, oh, yeah.
It's a profession where you have to consider rot a lot.
Yep.
And natural decay. I mean, that's the name of the book. It's something that persists. So
it keeps going, but like it has that je ne sais quoi, what you want to call it, the archival quality that the French call it. I think it's like in terms of a book that really goes into so many different aspects of the professions. I mean, I think the one quibble I would have with it is there's a conversation between Sel and Holly, where Sel is talking about how she still thinks of herself as a librarian, and then Holly's like, well, aren't you still are, aren't you? And I was like, wait a minute, hold on a second. Ein Minuten bitter. Because I mean, one of the things that I do go back and forth on with people is, or in the articles that I write, is the trying to get away from synonymizing archives and libraries, because there's the overlap. Obviously, we do a lot of the same things in terms of working with information and whatnot, but there's a clear demarcation at certain points. But in the book, it was the one time where I was just like, I have to stop here for a second. Hold on.
She is a librarian. She was a librarian, and now she's an archivist. So she always gets to call herself a librarian. How like the president is always a president, whether they're acting or not. So you're right. And you have stuff to deal with.
No, I know that. I understand that, Steenz. I have many issues I have to work on. Thank you. All right, fine. Librarian archivist Sel Walton. Madam Librarian. No, I mean, they're always small quibbles. Are you, Steenz, I think you might have been muted.
No, I was talking to myself.
Gotcha. Never mind. You're good. Keep going. But yeah, they're always like minor things. I think the only other one in the book was that she got the job as the archivist and it didn't require anything like beyond an AA or a BA or something like that. And I was just like,
it's not really the job you want, is it? Considering she has to live there. And also,
and I was thinking about it this morning. I was like, do I even bring it up? And like, why not? I know I'm wrong, but at the same time, it's like, Yeah, if you were a haunted museum and you needed
Yeah,
someone to do your night shift work.
they'll take literally anyone.
Yeah,
Which is like, I think about like most horror stories. That's how it always begins. It's like, we need a body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need a
It's
person
dog's body work, you
That's
know?
it, and
She's
that's literally what it is. She's doing the most like busy work of all time, you know, like scanning a photo and putting it into a computer. I
Yeah.
don't think you need somebody with a master's degree for that. You need a body. And so that is what she provided.
If you
Yeah,
do
it's
need a
true.
if you do need a person with a master's degree, you definitely need to pay them more than what you're probably paying them. But you know,
It's funny because like I don't so I worked as a book publicist for a while and I don't I would tell my authors all the time, don't go on Goodreads. Don't do it. Don't go
yeah,
on there. Don't read the reviews of your own book. But of course, you know, I'm stupid, so I do it sometimes. And the thing that I've seen the most for archival quality is actually that people complain that she gets the job without having a master's degree. And
That's
it's
the
really
point.
funny to me because I worked for 4 years full time in a library without a master's degree while I was writing the book. I didn't get my master's degree until I had left librarianship and was working in publishing when I actually finished my degree.
there we
And I
go.
think that that to me is like, I don't know, I could talk forever about our industry and
Oh yeah.
its gatekeeperiness in terms
Oh my
of
God. Yeah.
degree needing, but
Yeah.
you know,
we know that they're the factions of academia and how ridiculous that is, especially like for people in both archives and libraries who, you know, are go into debt to do jobs that pay them poorly. And
yeah.
I mean, as of the recording of this, there was the raid on Mar-a-Lago, whatever the hell it is, Trump's thing or whatever, because he had kept all those records from the National Archives. And people are like, don't mess with archivists. It's like, okay, cool, but what are you going to do about that? Like, everyone messes with archivists. We're kind of there. We're invisible when everything's good, and we're really front and center when everything goes wrong. So what do you want? Like, and librarians are going through the same thing with, you know, with COVID
Yeah.
restrictions, and there's all kinds of stuff going where it's like, you guys are the front lines, like, but we shouldn't have to be.
Yeah, no librarian should be administering COVID tests.
Yeah.
It's it's not your job.
Yeah, just
Not at all. Not at
yeah,
all.
way above the pay grade. That's just, it's so beyond the job description to be laughable at this point. And yet here we are.
Yeah.
um and yeah, and it's and obviously I'm coming from a place where I'm not trying to accuse you guys of anything, where it's just like, hey, I noticed this thing, obviously I'm not the only one. I still love this book to an unhealthy degree, probably. Again, I keep recommending it to everybody I know who's in the industry, and just being like, you should read this, because if you don't, I don't want to know you or talk to you ever again. But it's still like the themes of kind of like self-actualization as well as mental illness and all of that tied in with the historical the history of archives and museums and sanatoriums and all of that. Like, it's so complex. And again, seems like you said, like your art is so illustrative, but to be able to like capture that kind of heaviness in it is, you know, it's just remarkable. And I applaud it. Like, it's just
Oh,
so
thanks.
gorgeous and beautiful and well done. So like, well, good
Yeah,
job, you guys.
I wish
Good
I had
job.
like a better like way to describe how I did that. Yes.
I think about it all the time when I see anything from the book. I think a lot about how Steenz utilized daylight in the book to
Mm-hmm.
such great effect. There's so many like warm tones and
Yeah.
like shafts of sunlight, and they really evoke like I feel like anyone who's worked in like an old academic or
Mm-hmm.
institutional building has
Yeah.
like experienced those like bars of sunlight and like
Yeah.
weird
Brief
Yeah.
patches of
moments.
warmth and
Yeah, I guess it was just kind of like working from what I knew as well. Because, you know, working at Central Library, it's a beautiful, beautiful
Mm-hmm.
place,
yeah.
you know. And I don't know. I think the visual aspect is so important, but I think what makes it sorry, my voice is going away. I've been talking all weekend from the convention.
Sorry.
I just think about like a lot of the things that are happening to Cell. I try and put myself in that situation and what I would feel at that moment. And that's what ends up getting put onto the page. And I think that it works really well, but it can be very exhausting at the same time because, you know, Cell is really going through it. Yeah. You know, and having to put myself into the situation of someone that is struggling is difficult. You know, you forget how quickly you can, or at least I can anyway, how quickly I can start to feel empathetic for somebody. And so it just like, it's an interesting part of creation for me. It's a very emotional part of the work.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. She goes through it. I mean, even prior to the beginning of the story, she's gone through it.
Yeah.
And, you know, through those conversations with her ex-boyfriend and just what she is experiencing as she's connecting with this ghost. And it's interesting because Cell is also one of those flawed protagonists that we hear about all the time now. You know, she's not handling it perfectly. She's trying her best and she's dealing with it. And she's also trying to solve this mystery because she connects with this woman who, you know, medical history, like the amount of women who were put into, you know, sanitariums and hospitals because they were dealing with mental health issues, but no one believed them, and just thought it was a really good way to get, you know, rid of a problem. On the other hand, so to tie that all in with her dealing with all of this other stuff on top of it just makes the emotional moments, you know, hit harder and are just so much more impactful when you have kind of these like layers of her story and personality kind of all on top of each other. And then a building falls down. So it's like, I love malevolent architecture. It's such a good encapsulation, I think, of like making the archives kind of embody that, but also the museum in general is kind of like this overarching villain in a way, because all the things that Cell is dealing with have happened in the past. Like there's no like centralized like one person you could really like go, that's the true villain of this story. Like it's all people in the present dealing with the actions of the past and kind of reconciling that. And then the building just kind of collapses in on itself, and it's like it couldn't deal with it. It couldn't handle that, almost like its own history to a certain degree. Yeah, I don't know. That could just be me speculating.
No, that's exactly what it's all about. I mean, that's why there's such a big emphasis on destruction and rebirth, really, is because she is, in order for this museum to, and her life with this museum to move forward, she's got to break down what's already there and basically salt the earth and start again. You know, because there's such a horrible history of, you know, how people were taken care of in the mental health industry. And you kind of have to break it before we can really fix anything, because the systems that are in place now aren't set up with the victim in mind, you know? So, yeah, I think honestly that was one of those things that that actually grew on me the longer I thought about it, was because originally I was like, and then the building breaks. Okay. I guess. But, you know, the more you really think about the way any kind of institution works, physical or otherwise, it does need to be broken before you can really start again, start fresh and move forward. And you can't, you know, so it's kind of like, it's nice to know that there is an after, you know, and it's more than just all the shit that you have to get through, because you're getting through it to get to the next better situation, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
Yeah. I was a younger and greener writer then, and I might write a less obvious metaphor now than the building cracking.
It works. It
Um,
works.
but I think, you know, the part of the book that I still feel really fond of is actually the last like couple pages where they go back to the building grounds and have a picnic, because it
Yeah.
to me is about like, you know, you can't abandon where you came from. You
Hmm.
know, there's things to care for there. Um, you know, and the building itself housed a lot of bad, but you know, maybe there's the potential to rebuild it and move
Yeah.
forward better. But yeah, I don't know that I would go so into the house metaphor now that I'm, you know,
I
in my 30s and have a couple other books under my
yeah,
belt.
I mean, I think that comes with like everyone's first book. I mean, like I said, most people don't go back and reread their work. Because it's like I don't know, I know it inside out and enough that I've spent the time.
hmm
But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting prompt to have. You know,
Right.
what would you do differently if you were to rewrite or if you were to redraw it? And
There's also something
About
beautifully
that.
gothic about them having a picnic in the ruins of this old medical museum. So, I
yeah,
mean, if you want to go for motif
thing
or
to do.
yeah, it's very something like you'd almost expect in like Jane Eyre to happen or whatever. It's like we're just having like a picnic on the moors, and oh, there's the ruined house that burned down years ago.
I mean,
But I
every
think that's
book should
also
end
another,
like the end of a Smith song, right?
yeah. But I think that also, like, I don't know who else could come up with that sort of thing. It was a very much like, these are the kinds of things that we would do in our lives anyway, you know?
Mhm.
Like, I feel like a lot of who we are is put into those characters. So, I mean, you know, we
Absolutely.
were both, you know, working in libraries at the time. We were both in our early 20s. You know, we were both in the throes of becoming grown-ups. So, because,
The
you know, when you're
agonizing.
a young adult, you're just like a teenager level two. So,
True.
going through all of that, it there's a lot in there that says early 20s Steenz and Ivy,
Mhm.
which can be
Now
a
in
good
my books, everybody just cries all the time. I feel like that's when I send Steen's like a thing to read. It's like, well, I know you wrote it because people are
because
crying.
people are crying. Yeah.
They're having an emotional moment of catharsis and they're crying. Okay, here we go.
Now they just cry instead of destroying a building, I guess.
You see, the crying is a metaphor for the tears are like the water that erodes. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
It's I like I miss it, you know, like in a way because those were wild and exciting times. Very much manifest destiny. You know, we were just like carving our way into the industry at that time, and
Yeah,
it was just very exciting to be able to have that opportunity.
it was. It was. And we had a lot of, I mean, and I feel like it was the best way for me. So I had never written a comic book script before,
Mhm.
ever. I had no idea what I was doing. I was completely winging it.
Did
I
a good
would I
job
do that
winging it.
differently? Maybe. Maybe I would have written some shorter ones first. I think if somebody came to me and was like, "Should I write a 256-page graphic novel for my first comic?" I would say, "Don't do it. Not a good
Yeah,
idea.
actually,
You'll
I would
lose your
probably
mind."
say the same thing. Yeah, yeah.
But it made me who I am as a writer,
Mhm.
especially in comics, because the process was so collaborative between Steens and I.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, like I didn't come into writing comics with this predisposed notion that I was the writer and that
Mhm.
therefore my opinion was the only one when it came to the story. Like we were creating this together,
Right.
and I don't ever want to not work like that
Yeah.
Yeah.
after doing it, because I feel like that's why the final product was, I mean, if I could call my own book good, that's why the final product was good.
Girl,
You know, is because
you can call your work good.
I can't. I'm far too Catholic. So
I sympathize with that, yes.
um, but you know, like we made it truly together. You know, and then working with our editor Robin, and then Jomet, who did our lettering, and Steenz had help from a flatter. Like it became this very team effort to make the final product, and we had so much control over it. And I feel you, Steve. Like I miss it too. I don't feel like my process for writing is that way anymore. And also because I've worked in the industry now for so long that I think of things about like P&Ls and like, you know, marketing and the industry as a whole. Whereas before I was just like, this is the story we want to tell and we're gonna tell it.
You just punch a door open. You're like, listen, I'm here now and I'm gonna change the world. And then you're like a grizzled veteran. You're like, well, you know.
Yeah.
Kick the doors down and be like, listen up, old people. I'm here and I'm going to change the way comics are done with this book about archives.
But you know, it was interesting. I mean, we did work with, you know, Omni Press, which is a traditional comic book publisher, you know, and so we really had the best like options for what we were doing. Because if our first comic book was with Penguin Random House, it wouldn't have been as good as it was.
Yeah.
Because, and this is just me being me, but you know, editors at traditional publishers just aren't up to snuff when it comes to comic book editorial. You know, like there's a reason First, Second, and Scholastic is actually out winning comic book awards. You know, it's because those people actually have comic book professionals behind them. So we were really fortunate that our first book was with comic book professionals who understood that it was a completely, wholly collaborative effort. And that alone was enough to make it a positive experience.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that this would have functioned as well if you guys had done it serially, like if it, you know, like how your Marvels or your DCs, like.
Well, originally we wanted it to be a webcomic. So, because we had already set up the website and like 8 pages already available to start. And then we ended up not starting because we sent it to submit and we were waiting to hear back because we didn't want to start a webcomic if we knew it was going to get picked up and we didn't know how that would work, you know, legally. And so we were just like, let's just wait on the webcomic and see if we get rejected or not. Because if we get rejected, we'll just go ahead and press play on our webcomic. And if we do get it, then we're just going to scrap the webcomic entirely. So it was intended on being something that you could get serially. But now that I've seen the complete book, I don't think it would have been as successful because there are so many parts of the book that require time for you to take something in, time for a reader to, you know, pour over those pages. I think that an OGN is the best format for it. So I don't think it would have been as successful.
I think it would have been a different story. I think if we'd stayed with the webcomic, I think I would have ended up treating the writing much more like a Monster of the Weeky with like, you know, different things in the archive. And then when we got the book format, it was exactly what Steenz just said. There's so much more room to play with time because I knew there was no break. Like, so I did my first, with Steenz as my editor, actually, my first single issue series, Bountiful Garden, last year. It came out last year. I wrote it 2 years ago. Publishing time.
What is time? No one knows what it is anymore.
And it was such a learning curve coming from writing OGNs because there's like, you have to pace things so differently because not only are things broken up by issue, but there's actual like time, and it's like a month or, you know, however long passes between when a person picks up one issue and then they pick up the next. And so it has to, you know, flow with like the understanding that they're not going to remember everything that they read last month, and you know, you have to drop people in, it can't just be right in the middle, and it was such a change.
And that was your first single issue series, right?
That was it. Yeah, that was the first one.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember when I was looking for writers for that series, and Ivy came to mind because I knew how important it was for this series to be character focused, because it's genre, and anything that's genre, like, you have to do something to make it stand out. And I was like, well, because of the nature of this story, I think what's going to stand out isn't going to be so much the action, it's going to be the interpersonal relationships of these characters. So I was really excited to be able to work with Ivy on that, because I don't know, it just feels good to be able to bring someone in and walk them through something new and exciting. I guess that's why I'm a teacher.
You're such a good teacher, though. I mean, that's why you're a good editor.
Get out as I'm speaking.
This is why Steenz is a good educator and a fantastic editor, though, is like, it was that willingness to like walk through it. I don't know. I've been very blessed to like be able to go through so many firsts with Steenz, because I tend to be a little bit more panic driven.
I respect that.
That's true. You are. And that's kind of funny. But yeah, I think it was like a really excellent opportunity, because having already edited other people, I was like really excited to edit a friend, because
sorry.
Which one is it? Which one is it?
Here comes.
It's Pazu. I heard my voice. It was like, where's my auntie?
Special appearance by Pazu.
Exactly. You get one from each of us.
There we go. I should just go grab my cat and just bring him and put him in front and be like, here.
Sorry. There's a new dog on our floor. He's very angry.
Dang. Okay, this is a serious time for him right now.
Yeah, he's on alert. How dare you?
Blessings to your family in this troubling time. But yeah, so it was really cool to actually work on Bountiful Garden, and actually we're going to be tabling at Mice in Boston at the end of October, sometime.
The 22nd. I don't know. You can't trust anything that comes out of my mouth tonight, apparently, because I got the name wrong.
I will definitely, because this will come out in a few weeks, because there's a few people ahead of you in terms of. So this will probably come out closer to October than anything else. But this is a good segue into, because we're almost at end of time, so we want to get your bona fides and your Twitter links and all the fun stuff. Like, so we'll start with Ivy. What if people wish to follow you or find your stuff? Where might they do that?
I'm on the internet. Everything is pretty much at Ivy Noelle, IvyNoelle. Blessed with kind of a weird name, so I managed to snag that handle on most sites, except TikTok, where somebody already had it. So on that, I'm Ivy Well, which is kind of how I felt about getting TikTok, I guess.
That's so funny that you just like edited your other handle, because my handle for Reddit is not Oh Hey Steenz, it's Oh Hey Stranger. Oh my God. Isn't that wild? It's like, look, we have to do what we have to do.
But you can find me online. I have several books out right now. Secret Garden on 81st Street with Amber Padilla, Anne of West Philly with Maisha Haynes, the aforementioned Bountiful Garden, edited by Steenz, with Kelly Williams. So they're all relatively new in the last year or so. You can find them at your book or comic repository of choice.
Okay. And Steenz, go for it. Where should people look for you?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Oh Hey Steenz. I suppose you could go to my website. I'm not
You
sure
like it?
what you go there for. Oh, well, you can go to see the standard comic script that
Oh yeah, yeah.
I created. So if you need to learn how to write a comic script, go to ohsteenz.com and download the standard writing script. We've got a template that you can use in Drive as well as a template for Scrivener. I also am doing the syndicated comic strip Heart of the City, so you can read that every day in your local newspaper if you're in one of the 50 cities that carries it. I know for sure Philly, St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit. And then I know there's a couple of international ones as well. I think maybe like Denmark or something, but or you can read it in a book format. You can pick it up at any bookstore.
Cool.
The next conventions I'm going to be at CXC in Columbus, Ohio, mid-October, and then I'm going to be at MICE with Ivy at the end of October. So we'll both be there. If you haven't picked up Archival Quality or you haven't picked up Bountiful Garden and you want both of our signatures, Boston is where you need to be.
Yeah,
right.
that'll be the first time we've been together since the pandemic. So if you can get through the veil of tears, you can buy comics from us.
Separate us at all.
Yeah. Like get that rare picture of them just crying at each other's faces and be like, oh, and I'll put as many of these links as possible into the description when this goes up in October-ish, if I can remember my own schedule, which because I'm so good at this. Yeah, and for me, if anyone even cares, it's you can go on Twitter at darling_Sammy, SAMMY. I know how to spell my own name. You can also go to poparchives.com and look at all the articles, including the review that I did for Archival Quality, which is probably one of the first ones that's up on the website. And when I was rereading it the other day, and I was like, yeah, this is an early one. I can tell just from the way I formatted it. So, but still, the work is impeccable. The writing, beautiful, if I do say so myself. Yeah, if you like this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, perhaps. You can also suggest other properties in the comments or email me at popculturearchives.gmail.com. Again, I'm awesome at this. And let me know if there's something that you'd want to talk about or creators to harass to get to talk about their things like I did to Ivy and Steenz. Again, Ivy, Steenz, thank you so much for giving me your time and just your insights into this book. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you again.
Thank you for having us. It was good to reminisce.
Yeah,
it's true. It was nice.
Awesome. Well, yeah, and I guess that's where we'll end it. Bye, everyone.
Bye.